Baruch chapter 3 and verse 8. Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, where thou hast scattered us for a reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers, which have departed from the Lord our God. Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Hawayala. I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh, and we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, that are waiting on the second coming of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi Hamashiach. Today we're going to do a little bit of something different, just concerning a discussion that I've had, with not only various brothers in the faith, but even co-workers and just people in the world, when they talk about the cost of living and how things are getting tougher. So I wanted to kind of go into just a few things, just to kind of let brothers and sisters know what is going on, particularly for some of you younger brothers, because you are coming out of high school, or you're just basically entering into maybe your early 20s. You don't really have a full scope of what is out there and what things you are going to be subject unto, especially if you still live at home with your people. So, this is also going to help brothers that have been, have lived on their own, have paid their own bills for a period of time, and maybe they are just, in a situation where they're maybe living with someone else and they're going to eventually try and get back out. And also it's going to be for brothers that are already been doing that, but they want to improve their situation as much as we can in this captivity. As we do know that this is, part of the way the system is, that has been set up by the international bankers, the people that rule this world with deception, with deceit, and with much wicked oppression. And they've set up a system where, we've been subject to payments. And ultimately, this is going to affect, those of us that are, scattered among the nations that come out of the line of Jacob, in which we're going to face more of the harsher, punishments of this system due to the iniquity of our forefathers that departed from the Lord. So I'm going to kind of make a part one and a part two. This one, we're going to just kind of go over like what are things out there that you are going to be faced with as far as, how you're going to live. And then I'll do a part two to kind of give a few suggestions on what a brother or sister or even a married couple can do, to better their situation. Of course, we know that in the body that we are to bear one another's burdens. So this is not to negate, that true concept, but we do have to, do our own part in this as well. Meaning you have to be willing to work. But what I'm going to do is just going to point out what is I've been seeing online in regards to these different videos. I've actually had these different clips pop up over the last few days, where I just started noticing a pattern of some of the stuff, and I was also looking up things as well, and then they gave other suggestions of videos. So I'm going to go into some of the things that people are subject unto, and eventually we'll see exactly what it is that we need to watch out for, because we do have to be wise in this time and understand the world that we're living in order to understand how to survive as we approach towards the end. So the first video goes into how much money do Americans need to be comfortable. Okay, so I'm gonna play part of it. I'm not gonna be able to play the whole thing, but I'm just gonna kind of play the intro and some of the aspects of the calculation of affordability, so that way you can kind of see what they're talking about, and then we'll kind of move on to the other parts of the lesson in regards to other expenses or things that we would be subject unto in this day and age.
The average American says they need to earn $233,000 a year to be financially comfortable. But in 2021, American workers on average made only $75,203 annually.
Americans are sort of looking at...
Now that amount is fairly high. You have what is known as median income, and then you have average income. So it just depends on what chart one is looking at. One is going to deal with the 50th percentile of all earners and what that would be, and then you would have the actual average of all workers. Now remember, when you're dealing with the average, you're dealing with people in that number that are making, 7, 8, 9 figures a year that are counted in that average. And that's what they're not telling you when they say that average income, because you got CEOs clocking in, $500 million, $200 million. I mean, they got people that are out here really earning a lot of money when you're talking about like high-end level athletes and celebrities, really athletes more than even celebrities, unless you're just a box office celebrity, or you're a celebrity that's not only getting box office numbers as far as your status as a star, but you're also maybe making back end money as a director or producer of the same movie. Like someone like Mel Gibson type he would double dip on both sides, where he would make way more money because he's producing the movie and he's starring in it. So when you're talking about average income, it's very deceptive when you see, the likes of Jaylen Brown, signing a $300-something million contract for, 6 years or whatever, where he's making, on average $50 million a year. So you're talking about that person being added into average of, us everyday workers. It doesn't really tell the true story, right? We know that it's worse than what they're trying to say in this, but I digress.
how much money they would like to have to be financially secure, and that ends up being basically 3 times what the average income is in this country. And to be essentially wealthy or really successful, it's magnitudes above that.
72% of Americans said they weren't financially secure given their current finances. And more than a quarter of Americans said they'll likely never be financially secure.
By the numbers, their debt is lower and their savings are higher coming out of the pandemic. But they're more anxious about what's going to happen next, if they have job stability, if they're going to be able to have secure retirement.
With well over half of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, many are failing to meet some of their modest financial goals.
There are actually millions of people struggling. It's not something that people want to talk about, but if you are in a place where your financial security feels super precarious, you're not alone. And it's not your fault.
So how did it become so difficult to be financially secure in America? And what can you do about it? Let's do some budgeting. Americans working full-time earned a median monthly income of about $4,400 during the second quarter of 2023. The average worker takes home 75.2% of gross wages after taxes and benefits.
Yeah, so now they're giving you the real deal. So after taxes and benefits, this is what people are getting on average, right?
Take-home pay to about $3,380. And that just isn't enough to cover the cost of living in America today.
The cost of healthcare, that has skyrocketed. The cost of attending college has skyrocketed. The cost of purchasing a home has skyrocketed. But nowhere has anyone said wage growth is up 15%, right?
Take a look at some of the most essential expenses for Americans. The median monthly rent in the US is $2,029 as of June 2023. That amount already accounts for over 46% of the American median pre-tax income. But
so you see there that the average cost of rent is really high, especially in these bigger cities. And I know that I saw a video where I believe about 5 cities in the US had actually increased in a year like over $1,000 of rent. It was like Glendale, California. I think it was like Miami. It was like different cities that like people started moving to in Austin was one of them. There was a bunch of cities like during the so-called pandemic or the plandemic, where people were moving in such large numbers that it just shot the rent up to where if you were paying like maybe $900 a month in Austin in 2019, by 2020, 2021, that same place might have been $1,900, right? So we're talking about crazy explosion in rent. And some of this explosion is, a lot of the people that were benefiting off of, some of the things that were going on, as far as from an economic standpoint. There was a lot of people that were moving to Austin because, certain companies were moving there. So they benefited from their higher salary in California, moving to Austin. Also, you had people that were able to get, certain things financially, such as, PPP loans, or even getting the unemployment, right? The federal unemployment that was added in allowed people that never made that kind of money to have enough money coming in that they can go and get an apartment in a certain part of town, or they can rent somewhere. And that just naturally drove prices up. This is the reason why whenever they infuse and throw all this money into the economy, it leads to people increasing their lifestyle, meaning they're going to improve their lifestyle. They're going to get a better car. They're going to get a better place. They're going to get better furniture. They're going to get a better phone. They're going to they're going to start taking trips. They're going to start doing these things with this extra money naturally. Okay. Now, some may invest, but a lot of people are going to just improve their own quality of life. And that's going to drive up prices of things such as rent.
U.S. agencies classify spending more than 30% of one's gross monthly income on rent as being rent burdened. Meanwhile, the median mortgage payment for a 2,400 square foot house was $1,957 per month. However, a common rule of thumb advises spending 28% or less of your pre-tax income on mortgage payments. For the median gross monthly earnings, that translates to just $1,232.
As we talk to households and talk to consumers out in the real world, especially those, say, under 40, housing is the big issue.
Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That amount is significantly higher than any of USDA's estimated grocery bills, including more generous and liberal food plans. Add the out-of-pocket health expenditures that cost the average Americans $96.42 every month, and you get data from the
work. We really want to sort of pack up and are now becoming more expensive.
5 cents on food every.
So this saying the average American spends this much on food a month, and believe it or not, this is actually possible. It makes sense, especially if you have a family. You may spend this much a month, but even if you're single, you also got to be careful like how you're spending, because you'd be surprised like how much money you're spending, eating out, going and getting a combo at this place or that place. It's running you $9 to $12. And if you hit a place up 4 or 5 times a week, and then you mix in with your groceries and any snacks, any beverages, like, any, your water is of course going to be one of the cheaper things that you're going to buy. But if you're basically spending all this money on food, it's going to all add up. And with the cost of food going up, that's going to be a problem as well. Okay. So this is some of the things that the people are being subject unto, and this is a massive amount of pressure that's being put upon people right in this country.
Every month, according to the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
So I'm going to kind of stop there because there's other videos that I kind of want to go into. This is the average cost of rent in most cities. So we're going to go ahead and just play a little bit of it.
Cost of rent is on the rise across the country.
In fact, a recent report shows nearly 400 U.S. cities are seeing increases in the average rent price.
So over 400 cities are seeing rising rental costs.
According to rent.com, the national average rent of a one-bedroom apartment is up 25.3%. Yikes! From June of last year, it's slightly worse for two-bedroom apartments, which are up by 26.5%.
Ouch in every way possible. Brian Carberry joins us now for more. He's a senior managing editor at apartmentguide.com. Oh my goodness, we know the pandemic, of course, and inflation, the main drivers of this trend, but can you just break down for us how we've gotten to this point where the average rent in some cities is just right through the roof?
Absolutely. It is going through the roof in a lot of places, and we are definitely seeing more major cities right now that are seeing rent price increases, that we're seeing cities that are staying flat or even decreasing. You hit on the pandemic, you hit on inflation, but we really need to look at the housing market in general. You had a lot of people at the end of 2019, the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, looking to buy a home, and then that housing market really shot up.
And the reason why the people were looking to buy a home around that time, because the mortgage rates dropped down significantly. However, during that time, houses actually started to shoot up in value. And it was a very interesting thing because back in 2008, 2009, when you had the other, the financial crisis, right around 2010, 2011, 2012, mortgage rates went to an all-time low. Prices of home fell. That's around the time that I, had bought a home. And, I wasn't making like, big money, but I was, in a position where I could get a low interest rate mortgage and live in one of the best neighborhoods in Texas, for very low. We're talking about very low what I was paying. And a lot of people weren't in that position because there was a lot of job loss. But fortunately for me at the time, I was in a good financial position to get into a home. And people, that had suffered the, consequences of, the subprime lending. There was a lot of people that lost their homes. It drove down prices in neighborhoods as well. Whenever you have those type of things happen. And it just created a perfect situation for someone who, for anybody at that time who was, an above average, but not maybe an exceptional earner at the time. They could have gotten a home in a lot of these, big cities, especially down south and Midwest, and certain parts of, maybe the West Coast, especially in your smaller areas or your cities that were not maybe large, like Phoenix, Vegas. These are areas that I was actually looking at the time. And these places were super cheap. So now those same homes, fast forward to 2020, 2021, those same homes are double the value. And in some cases, 2.5 times the value when you go to places like Austin. Okay, and that's something that people weren't even expecting, at that time. But people that know about how a lot of millionaires are made, among the main ways to become a millionaire is to own real estate. You own a bunch of real estate, you invest in the real estate game. That's where a lot of people become millionaires. However, we're in a time when things is transitioning. We know what Klaus Schwab said: you'll own nothing and be happy. So that's the plan of what they're trying to do, right, with the masses, to make them to be permanent renters and not really owners, and subject them to payments and subject them to different things that they want them to do in society via the MOTB. All right.
Turned a lot of people away from buying a home towards renting. It was about 6 months, 9 months later, we really saw the rental market shoot up. About a year ago now, that we started seeing these massive increases in rent price spikes to double-digit levels that have kind of stayed up since then. It's interesting though, because if you look since January of this year, it has been relatively flat. A one-bedroom apartment is only up about 1%. A two-bedroom apartment only up 3% from the beginning of this year. So we could start to see some stabilization as we go into the end of the summer, and we're comparing to a time where those prices have already increased. So some possible good news for renters there, but it really just does boil down to all those factors like you said, and just the demand for an apartment is so much higher, and the supply is just not there to really meet that demand right now.
So I know.
Okay, and one of the things that's happening is you have a lot of people. The reason why the prices is driving up, because you have a lot of people that actually make very good income, and they're the type of people that maybe prior to the pandemic they would have been able to get homes. And I've seen videos, and I don't want to go into all the other videos, but I've seen videos where you had a couple that was making their combined amount of money they were making was like well over 100,000. I want to say it was like 130, 150. Somewhere around there, and they were looking to buy a home, I believe, somewhere. It might have been Phoenix or one of these cities, and they were putting in bids, and they were getting outbid left and right, and they couldn't get a home, and they forced the husband, okay, to basically say that, hey, they're just going to have to consider renting until things stabilize. So now, what happens when you get these people that are making this very high income? And then they're going and renting a 2-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment, that maybe originally in 2019 might have been $1,500, and now the property owner who rents out that property now can basically say, you know what, I can rent it out for $2,500 because I got somebody that can afford it. Because that mortgage that they're looking for is going to be way more than that, so to them they're just going to take it. And now the person that really may need that 2-bedroom or, you know, in an event of a high earner, that's a single high earner that can't afford to get a home because your average mortgage is like, you know, something stupid, you know, $44,000 a month, or who knows, you know, depending on the city. You're talking about astronomical prices. I believe in LA, I seen a chart that was saying, I think it was like $5,300 a month was the average mortgage in Los Angeles. You know, I think the average rent was like somewhere like $2,900. It was something ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? So I was just like, man, if you are a high earner and you're single, now you are not even in a position to even go buy a home, because you don't even have enough finances to even do that. In addition to that, the interest rates is hovering around 7-8% compared to maybe 3% years back. And then on top of that, the housing supply, the supply of homes on the market is lower, which is driving up the prices or keeping them high versus them dropping low. Now, there are some, I watch a lot of different YouTube channels. Usually what I do is I watch a person that's an expert in different areas. So I might watch a person that's, you know, an expert in housing. Then another one is expert in cars, and another person is expert in, you know, credit and loans and things like that. So that way I get a good idea of like what is being presented. And a lot of times they'll present, you know, up-to-date information week to week on what's going on out there. And people are in a position now where they're thinking about, you know, what their futures is going to be like. And this is one of the many reasons why a lot of things in this society is collapsed. And we have to understand, as believers in the scriptures, that the way things were and what we were supposed to inherit, you know, going into the land, as far as, you know, owning our own stuff and passing down an inheritance to our children, and us inheriting stuff from our parents, that is, you know, pretty much broken in this society because of the greed of the elites, and because ultimately, you know, it's coming to an end. Now they're orchestrating a lot of these hardships on the masses to fulfill their agenda, but people are not going to see the handwriting on the wall until it's too late. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next section, and this is talking about something, the number one wealth killer that no one is talking about, and that's talking about cars. Okay, so a wealth killer, and the reason why it's named that is because cars are a depreciating asset. However, they can appreciate depending on what you're getting, you know, so it's not always the case. It just tends to be. But in this video, this guy goes into, you know, how to properly shop for a car, how to probably get the best value out of your vehicle, and choose the right one that makes financial sense. So I'm gonna just play part of it so he can show you exactly like what is going on right now in today's car market. And mind you, these are the big expenses that you're going to have as, you know, a couple or as a single person, right, in this society.
Right here. This thing here is going to cost me about $1,000 to replace. Historically, one of the biggest expenses people have sits right on the street. In this video, I'm revealing what that is and how you can save thousands of dollars every year. Car ownership is an American obsession. Kids draw pictures of cars, teenagers pretend to drive them, and adults fantasize about their dream cars. Socially, a nice car represents success, well, with a twinge of coolness. Many of us want a car that we can call our own, even if it's just to tell public transportation to off. But it's not so easy anymore. In recent years, the rise of the cost of car ownership has outpaced inflation and stopped people from building wealth.
The cost to own a vehicle is at an all-time high.
AAA says the average cost to own a car is $894 a month, the highest.
So the average cost of owning a car is $894 a month. Okay, that is in today's time. This is something that if you, for those of you brothers that are older, you know what cars were costing. Even new cars were costing like 10 years ago. Like, that's ridiculous. And you know what a car note, I remember, I mean, back 10 years ago, a car note that was like over like $400 a month was considered high. Like, if you was balling, if you're paying anything over $500 a month, you was pushing something really nice. That's how people looked at it back then. But cars have gone up in value so much, and I don't know if he's going to bring up the average cost of a new car today. But I've seen videos on it. We'll see what he talks about in this one. If not, then I'll kind of go into that a little bit.
It's ever been. As a result, transportation continues to be the second largest monthly household expense, and it's only going up. So let's break down the cost of owning a car and show you how I save thousands of dollars from it every year. Let's use the 2020 Honda Accord as an example. This is one of the best-selling economic...
So here he breaks down like owning a Honda Accord, and basically showing you the price and the interest rate and things like that. But when you go into it, let's see if we can find that part. Yeah, so he's going to break down the true cost of ownership over the course of it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go here because I'm going to go right here because he's going to break down something in regards to each section. Let's see if we can find it. I think this is it here. Yeah, so he goes into the different areas. Like, you know, when you own a vehicle, it's going to be more than just you buying the vehicle. It's going to be the other things, right? So fuel, financing, the taxes and fees that you're paying, registration, insurance, okay? He doesn't have it here, but also the depreciation of the value of the vehicle over the course of the ownership over 5 years. So you have to understand that if you're going to buy a car, you have to factor this thing in. Now, I actually had a situation where I did have a 2020 vehicle, and, you know, it, after a while, you know, when I looked at everything as far as what I was getting value out of it, because I felt like, you know what, it's best for me to just get rid of it, because ultimately I was going to save way more money not having the vehicle. And I already had a separate vehicle as well that was already paid off. And I already had fixed that one up. So when I fixed that one up well enough to where that vehicle was reliable enough for me, I went ahead and got rid of the newer vehicle, which was a 2020 model. And that allowed me to basically be in a better position, which, you know, we'll kind of get into as well. But we have to look into all those things. A lot of times, you know, you have to know whether or not you need something versus you want something. And sometimes something you need may later turn into, you know, it not being a need anymore. And then at that point, you're deciding, you're keeping it because you want it. And you don't know whether or not that's going to be in your budget, in your situation. Okay. Because I've seen, you know, a situation where a girl, she had a vehicle and she was paying like $400 a month on the car note, like $450 a month. But then on her insurance, she was paying like $400 a month. And this was actually something that I was kind of shocked by, but she was living in another state. And when I actually did more research, I found out that was actually close to what people were paying, you know, in the state that she lived in. You know, maybe $100 less, but anywhere between $250 to $400 a month, depending on their driving record, depending on the level of coverage that they're getting. I couldn't believe it. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, knowing what it was when I was, you know, first driving as a kid, you know, younger, when I bought my first vehicle on my own. I've owned multiple cars. I've owned sports cars. I've owned SUVs. I've owned sedans, coupes. Like, so to me, it's like, you see what's going on. You're like, man, they're really, really putting a burden on the masses by what they're doing. And insurance is something that you have to have. So it's one of those things that they're able to use that against you. Now, I think right here, he's probably going to show how much he had it for the year. And let me see if I can find it, because I don't want to play this whole video. I want to just go to his, so this is for the year, insurance for the year, you know, pretty much $4,500. I mean, you do the math on that. That's roughly $300. That's like $400 a month. Because you're doing 12 times 4, that's $4,800. So you're talking about like $375, $350 a month for insurance on a vehicle. That's absurd 10, 20 years ago. Absurd. Okay? And this is what people don't understand when they're wanting to go buy a vehicle. they're wanting to buy a vehicle, but they're not factoring in insurance. And a lot of times, if you haven't owned a vehicle and then you want to go buy a vehicle, you don't realize that you're going to be paying a lot of it on insurance. You're just thinking about this car note, not realizing your insurance may be just as much as your car note. Okay, some people, their insurance is more than their car note, depending on what kind of vehicle they're getting, right? So we have to be very mindful of this, and there's ways to actually get around it, which I'll kind of like get into a little bit, as far as like how, if things can be, your burden, your tax burden can be lessened. Now, I'm not an expert level on tax. There are actually brothers that actually do understand taxes a lot better, and they can let you know about how to circumvent and get around some of these things on a legal level to help lessen your burden, year to year. Now, we're going into this because even though we know we're at the very end, we have to understand that at the end of the day, brothers and sisters, they have to live. They have to find a way to have a place to stay, transportation and things. So we have to still go into this from time to time, just so brothers are aware and they know that brothers are willing to discuss these things, with you as well. Now, the next level is the cost of groceries. Okay, so I'm gonna just play it briefly.
I guarantee you, anytime a product can be passed off as something more expensive, it will be.
And prices are very dynamic. They move up and down every single day.
An orange that's grown conventionally and an orange that's grown organically, I think they're going to have the same vitamins in them.
Organic food is not healthier or safer for you.
Fraud happens more with more expensive foods.
Cheaper oil is added to the more expensive oil, and the label still reads 100% extra virgin olive oil.
So you see, they're out the gate. They're already telling you that there's a finesse going on with the food industry. Okay, this is something that is talked about, whether or not your food that you're eating is really organic or is it GMO. I'll tell you a story. Went to HEB. This is many years back. Walked in, looked to the right, saw a sign, said organic seedless watermelons. Crazy, right? But this is what they had in there. So you have to understand that a lot of these things that they're doing it and they're making a premium profit off of people that are choosing these things. Am I saying that brothers and sisters shouldn't choose organic? No, I'm not. Ideally, it'd be good if you're able to get organically grown food, and that's what you should strive for. I would even choose things that are not, that I feel or that, may be GMO. Now, there are ways to kind of figure that out, and there are places in different grocery stores you can go to. There are certain markets, especially maybe your more immigrant-based markets, like your Asian or Indian food markets, where they actually will have more likely organic food based on their food supplier that they get their stuff from. And I do see people shopping at places like that. There is a place that I do know of near my area that has, a lot of that type of stuff if you wanted to make sure that you're getting the best nutrition. Unfortunately, in the society we're in and the way the laws are set up to allow these, food industry companies to, serve whatever it is and label it whatever it is. And we know that you have the FDA. They're going to allow these people to get around it because they're going to be greasing their palms. They're going to allow them to implement different things into the market, a lot of fake food, or GMO food that they're going to promote among the masses, unfortunately. So in addition to that, they're still going to go and knock in, additional costs as well while they're lying with the labels. Go figure.
So you think this is olive oil, right? Wrong. Well, maybe some of it is, but this is actually a classic example of food fraud.
Extra virgin olive oils are being switched out with cheap ones and fraudulent to sell something labeled as something else.
Why is this fish being mislabeled?
Your Parmesan cheese products do not contain any Parmesan cheese.
Because there was no one brand that stood out as completely safe.
Oh, so we can't eat anything?
I guarantee you, anytime a product can be passed off as something more expensive, it will be. It's that simple.
Counterfeits, dilution, substitution, and mislabeling. Food fraud not only harms consumers' wallets, it puts their health and safety at risk.
We might not know the overall impact of food fraud because so much of what fraudsters do is hidden from us and has been for centuries.
Some estimates say food fraud affects at least 1% of the global food industry, at a cost as high as $40 billion a year, according to the Food and Drug Administration.
Grocery Manufacturers of America estimated that 10% of the commercially available food in the United States is adulterated. That's 1 in 10. It means if you're not on that 8-item or less checkout line, you've got something in your cart when you leave the supermarket that's probably bogus.
Here's how and why fake food sits secretly in our kitchen cabinet.
Yeah, so, and we know that food is going up, and we know that there's a lot of different types of things that are being promoted in society that are making people seek alternative sources of food. And a lot of times people have to understand is that food is essential to your health. And as you see in this country, we have a very big problem with obesity. So we have to understand that what is it that they're feeding the people and what is it you're spending money on. So why am I saying this? Because not everything that you buy that's more expensive than the other makes it more real, right? So you can still go to a place where you see them, they have certain things, farm-raised chickens, and you can basically pay less or more, but you know what you're getting in terms of quality. But why are they making it more expensive for you? Because one, as they make things more expensive for you, you're going to seek out cheaper alternatives that they can mass produce. And this is where they get into the frankenfoods, where they're trying to make these fake things like you see the Impossible Burger, the Impossible Chicken. These are things that they're making in a lab, essentially, and they're putting it together and they're making it look like the real thing. And then now, if they start pricing those things at a lower cost over the real stuff, then people will go for that, because then they'll be told it's some kind of a healthier alternative, or you're helping the environment in some way or fashion. So you have to be very much aware of what they're trying to bring, all right, to the masses as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave off of this because this is 44 minutes long, but I'm going to go ahead and go into this briefly, which is the student loan issue. This one was recently struck down, that they were not going to forgive the student loan debt. This is something that some of you brothers or sisters may be subject to, okay? So the decision was made that they were not going to forgive these student loans, and that people that were under the moratorium, where they just didn't have to pay it, because this is going back really to Donald Trump being in office, where during COVID he stopped the payments needing to be made for student loans, and now they're going to be back by September.
Court struck down President Biden's student loan forgiveness program, which was set to wipe out nearly $430 billion in debt. The 6-3 decision signals to millions of borrowers that they must begin paying back their debt after a 3-year pause as a result of the pandemic.
For borrowers around the country who had been making financial decisions based on the hope that they would see this forgiveness, it could have major implications to their pocketbooks.
Biden's student loan forgiveness.
So basically, you had people that were not making student loan payments, and we're talking about for the past few years. And what's happened is that people have adjusted their life without having to factor in the student loan payments that they would have been subject unto. So this includes people that went and maybe got a better place, because remember, like I said, when someone starts to have more money, the trend is for you to improve your standard of living, right? To improve your place, maybe to take trips, improve your vehicle, basically an overall improvement of lifestyle. And if that is not taken into account when it comes back in, now you may have to downgrade your lifestyle. And this could lead to other areas. There's trickle down effect of what can happen when these student loan payments are brought back in and people are subject back onto those payments, and then now certain things that they have in their life they cannot maintain, and then something's got to give, right? So we have to be very much aware of that, and this is all going to have a ripple effect, because even if this doesn't affect you directly, indirectly it can affect you. Because if you got siblings, if you got, a parent like a mother or whoever that maybe went to school, and then they're going to have these payments coming back, and they're going to start having a trickle down effect. Remember, this can impact you as well. It can impact you indirectly. Okay. And also a lot of the stuff that's going on with the rising crime, rising theft, basically the rising income inequality and the desperation that's out here, it just heightens all of that. And this affects your interpersonal relationships with people, because then you have people that are in a desperate mindset, and then they could be coming at you to try and get something out of you, wickedly. Okay, so we have to be mindful of like what is going on in this society and how we have to deal with these type of things. And another one is the infamous credit card debt. Okay, and the increase of it is basically it has to do with the things that we talked about prior. The increase in all these things, housing costs, vehicle costs, the cost of food, student loans, all these things are actually the reason why credit card debt is increasing. If you notice, I didn't talk about clothing, okay? Because when it comes to clothing, most people can cut that down very easily and not buy more clothes. That's something we can talk about as well, as far as the clothing thing, maybe in another lesson. I may add something in there when it regards to clothing, but I didn't bring it in there because most people in America have like a set of clothing that is enough for them to, get through whatever seasons that they need to get to. Okay, they need to get through summer. They have clothing that's going to be good enough for that. Winter as well, right? Those are the two extreme, and then everything else, is more in between when it comes to fall and spring in terms of what can be handled depending on where you live, of course, right? So for the most part, I don't have to bring up clothing. Clothing is an issue more if you have a young child that's continually growing. Then that's where it could be an issue, especially if you have younger children and you need to be changing their clothes as well. So that is where it'll be an issue, but there's ways to get around that also. So I'm gonna play a little bit of this credit card debt piece, and then we'll get into some precepts.
Credit card debt in the U.S. hit an expensive milestone this week. Nationwide, it surpassed $1 trillion for the first time ever. Now, that's according to new data released by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The average credit card balance per customer was just over $5,900 in the second quarter of 2023. Joining us now to talk more is Michelle Lambright-Black. She's the founder of CreditWriter.com. So, Michelle, why have credit...
So as you see there, credit card debt is now surpassed $1 trillion for the first time ever. Okay, this is a consumer debt credit card, and what is going on is, and I've actually seen it. I like you get alerts all the time, emails, 20, 29, 30%, and this is like standard now for like many of these issuers of credit. It's getting pretty bad, and it's in part because the credit thing is being crunched, and this all ties in with some of the stuff that we went into before. If you go and watch some of the videos we did on money and Greg Gammon and the M2 money supply and the tightening of credit and the bank failures, all of this is tied together. This all part of the ecosystem that's driving some of these issues that's going on the credit side as well. Okay, which we'll get into some of that also for as far as what to do moving forward in y'all's own situations.
Credit card balance has increased so dramatically in recent years?
Well, when credit card usage increases, it's usually a symptom of some kind of underlying problem. And recently, consumers have been facing a lot of issues. Inflation has been rampant for several months. And even though inflation figures are starting to trend downward, prices are still up for a lot of people on a ton of goods and services. And that's like a pay cut for millions of consumers.
So what happens is you see the wages versus inflation. Okay, so this is showing you the rate of growth for both inflation and wages. And as you see here, and this is going over, the years, okay? This is January 2020, and then July. So that's what it's, year by year, right? 21, 22, 23. So this is where we're at now. And as you're seeing, that the rate of inflation is outpacing the rate of wage growth. Okay, and that's a problem, because wages, in order for Americans to continue being able to keep up with everything, their wages need to outpace the growth of inflation. Okay, and roughly, that's really has not happened. From this point on, it kind of eclipsed it. And people felt the burden, and more than likely, many of the increased spending that happened on the credit side, okay, the use of credit would happen here for people to cover their expenses that they can't cover. And we know that there's other things that happened, like we already discussed earlier. Now, I didn't bring up the car thing, but I know the average new car is over $40,000 now. Okay, we're talking about, car notes in the 700 range on average. And, a certain percentage, a large percentage of cars that are being, bought now are over $1,000 a month. Now, the people that are able to do that, they're going to be higher earners, but there are people that were in need of vehicles and that were getting vehicles that they really couldn't afford, but because of the need of transportation, they got it at the time. And then what happens is, if they start making payments on this car or vehicle and they realize their money's lower, they're going to need to find a way to offset that cost. And a lot of times people are going to dip into their credit. Okay, they're going to use their credit card to cover bills that they are also subject unto, such as, of course, you're talking about your grocery bill, your electricity, your water, your gas, your phone, whatever, right? So this is kind of what's happening. Now, we do see here that there is a dip that has happened, and much of this dip that's happening with the inflation is actually due to the increase of the interest rates, the Fed raising the interest rates. Because what happens is, the whole point of the Fed increasing the interest rate is to cause deflation, okay? Is to prevent people from going and buying certain goods. And this is very common in a situation where people are, they're getting more desperate. It's not getting any easier. So these are things that are just part of the reality of what we have to talk about, So I'm going to go ahead and hit off a few different precepts. This is Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 7. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So we see here in Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 7, how the rich rules over the poor, right? In this society, the rich rule over us through lending, through subjecting us to payments. Okay, that's how we are serving in the rich, and they're ruling over us. They've used this mechanism of the banking system. This is one of the secrets of the elites, is to utilize the banking system to subject people to payments and to make it to where you are being ruled over through this. Okay. And these things go in different areas in society, because people will look at lending is deeper than that, right? When you look at a car, you're borrowing it, you're paying it to a lender. When you have a mortgage, you're still paying to a lender. Okay? If you're renting or leasing a home or an apartment, you're still paying to a lender. They're allowing you for a particular period of time to utilize that. Okay? So people understand is that these mechanisms that are here, they're not situations where back in the ancient world where you built a house for your family, you own land, and then when you passed away, it dropped down to your son, and he wasn't subject unto these things. So the system of this is very, very heavy. And this even goes into the taxation system as well. All right. So now we do have the good news in that in the end, the Lord will deliver his people. So this is Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 12. I will also leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the name of Yahweh. So we know that even though we're going through these things as a people, particularly those that are, believers of the gospel of Yahawashi, Hamashiach, that we are the ones as the people that are afflicted, but there's going to be a remnant of Israel that's going to trust in his name and they're going to be delivered. So we have to continue to be in that same mindset and understand the goal of the things that are ahead of us. Okay. And we have to basically have a proper mentality to understand that there is things greater to come. And that's why in the meantime, we do have to talk about these things, but we have to ensure that we are focused on the ultimate goal. Okay. And what is that? Is to inherit the kingdom of heaven. So this is Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Therefore there shall take no thought for the morrow shall take thought for things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Now that doesn't mean that you don't think about what you're doing for the next day. It just means don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it. In the time that we're in a body, when brothers have necessities, there's willingness to help brothers with necessities. Okay. Now, if you're a person who is wanting to, be in a position where you could be able to help brothers, that's part of why we work. Because, not only do we work for ourselves, we work for those that are around us, that we may be able to give to those that ask, that have need of things, right? But we also have to do our part by also working, being willing to work, able-bodied men, working and doing their part, okay? Because you have people that they look at the body, and I'm talking specifically here, but I'm talking about in general, and I've seen this in other groups and behavior, that other brothers got to work to take care of you and you do nothing. So we do know that if a man doesn't work, neither shall he eat. So the Most High is not telling us to just sit there and think that we ain't got to put in the work for the things that we need of necessity. Okay, but we do have to understand that if we seek first the kingdom, he's going to add these things to you. And brothers have testimonies about that, about staying the course, and the Most High open up different doors of like a place to stay, better situation as far as, work, financial situations improving. So we have to understand that what we need to do and how the Most High is going to take care of his elect. And we have to fully believe that. And we have to also use wisdom in this current world to understand, how it is that we must navigate the society we're in until, the coming of our Lord and Savior, Yahawashi Hamashiach. So hopefully this is edifying to you, brothers and sisters. And again, I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father, Yahweh. And we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior, Yahawashi. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom.